Hi, everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is a solo live stream looking at Daenerys in the Winds of Winter. As always, the way we're going to structure this is that I've got a whole load of questions from my patrons. I'm going to work my way through them to provide some sort of structure, but I'm going to try and get to as many questions as I can in the chat as we're going through. Now, what's probably the best place to start with this is to give a little bit of a background, because we're talking about the books, and obviously we've got the show in our mind when we're trying to think about Daenerys' story. So let's just try and unpick where we're at in the books. So we're somewhere around about, I think it was between seasons 5 and 6. If you remember, when Daenerys had spent some time in Meereen, she's been ruling Meereen, and then there's that huge action at the fighting pits, and she gets taken off by Drogon deep into the Dothraki Sea. Now, if anything, in the books, it's even more dramatic. She's on fire as she goes, as she gets taken away by Drogon. The rumors afterwards among the people of Meereen were that, surely she's dead. Maybe they even saw her falling off the dragon as she was flying away. It's all a little bit uncertain. People don't know quite what's going on. Anyway, she has flown off on Drogon. She could not control Drogon. Drogon took her off to the Dothraki Sea. We have about a chapter of her moping around, eating some strange berries. Perhaps we see the return of her moon cycle. It's not 100% clear, but that seems to be the implication of what happened there. And then the implication is that she's now going to be caught by the Dothraki, as we did see on the show. So that's where we're at. In her absence in Meereen, obviously they've got to figure out what to do. Barristan Selmy has effectively taken over. She's married Hisdar. Hisdar is sort of ruling, but Barristan Selmy is the person who has called himself the Hand of the Queen and is ruling in effect in her stead. That's needed because basically while she's gone, everything is going to pot in Meereen. There's still this constant internal opposition to her from the Sons of the Harpy. The Pale Mare, which is this plague, effectively is ravaging around the whole area. And the Yunkish, the city of Yunkai, have come and are besieging the city, and they're now starting to throw plague bodies into Meereen. To add to all of that, we've got the beginnings. We've got some chapters, pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter, beginnings of what is going to be a massive battle going on there. We've got Victarion Greyjoy, who's headed over with a huge fleet, part of the Iron Fleet, and Dragonbinder, this great magical horn, on a secret mission from Euron to capture a dragon or 3 and Daenerys and return home. He's got his own ideas about what he's going to do. Outside the city, we've got this whole load of encampments. In one of them, we get Jorah and Tyrion, who've now made their way down there. We've also got Marwyn the Mage, who's heading over to try and find her. So Meereen is going to be this epicenter of huge amounts of characters all coming together at the beginning of the next book. But Daenerys is completely away from this at the start of the Winds of Winter, on her own in the Dothraki Sea. So that's where we're at. And the hints are, thematically, she spent a whole book trying desperately to be managing Meereen as a good leader. She's been making compromise after compromise, things that she doesn't want to do, putting her dragons effectively in a prison. She's reopening the fighting pits. These are things she did not want to do, but time after time, she's been convinced that that's what's needed in order to allow her to effectively manage this city. So that's where she was. But all through this, in the back of her mind, she's had Quaithe who's been talking to her. Remember who you are. The dragons remember who you are. You're a Targaryen. And finally, we're starting to get the hints that this is going to be a turning point for her. She's going to perhaps turn away from being this figure of compromise, and I say that in the best possible use of the word compromise, a spirit of compromise, and actually becoming a figure of action. Targaryen focused once more on reclaiming what she believes is hers, the Iron Throne. So that's where we pick up the story. And then we've got obviously 2 more books that we need to work our way through. And most of the questions that I've got are around this idea about, well, how is this going to be different to what we saw on the show? And it will be different to what we saw on the show. Some of the storylines are probably going to be quite similar. This one is one of the ones that I think will be quite different. So it's worth us trying to unpick what it is that the key differences are going to be. Thank you so much, Ariel Winchester. Thank you for the super sticker. That's just saying thank you. I really appreciate that. And I had, what else? I think there was another super sticker that I got from, oh, no, we've got Delphine Morphia. Thank you so much. With a super chat saying a tinfoil. There are tons of dragon eggs in the Shadowlands beyond Asshai. Daenerys will see that through a glass candle, get a bunch of them, hatch them, and conquer the world. Yes, I think this is tinfoil. So the Shadowlands is this really dark area right off to the east, beyond Asshai, that even the people of Asshai don't to go to. And yes, the rumors are that there are lots of dragon eggs there. This is where Illyrio Mopatis says that he got the dragon eggs he gave to Daenerys from. He probably didn't, as it happens, but that's what he says. He says they come from the Shadowlands. Now, could she go there? Well, there was a time when George R. R. Martin, I think, was thinking that Daenerys could head all the way east, go to Asshai, but that he seems to have abandoned that idea now. He said that we're only going to see Asshai perhaps in memories from somebody like Melisandre, so we're not actually going to get her go there. I think that we'll find that where she is sort of based at the moment, the Slavers Bay is about as far east as she's going to go. From now on, she's now heading west. So that is where we're at. So much as I love the idea, and yes, there almost certainly, I think, are going to be dragon eggs all the way over there, I don't think that's going to play a part of the story. We're going to have 3 dragons in this story, and that's it. Michaela S., thank you so much, saying, hi, Robert, just showing love and support to the channel. I'm excited about today's topic. Me too, actually. This is one I've been thinking about for quite some time. It's, as I say, the character of Dany and what happened in the show was the thing that created the most anger, I would say, within the Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire community. So I think it's good. I have come back to it a couple of times since, but I think perhaps what I can try and bring to this is a rounded assessment of Daenerys's character that doesn't just lurch between, oh, she's fantastic, a wonderful person freeing slaves and will never harm anyone, or she's terrible and is going to burn everybody and all the rest of it. George R. R. Martin doesn't write characters that generally that are one extreme or the other. Yes, we have some Joffreys and all the rest of it, but Daenerys is a multi-layered character with lots of different strands to who she is. And if I could just give you, just to start with, this idea that a lot of what we look at with Daenerys is 3 kind of key drives that have come out here. The first one is this desire for home and for safety. We see this again and again with her dreams and thoughts of the house with the red door. That was a time when she was a very young child. It was almost certainly a house in the gardens of the Sea Lord of Braavos, but it's where she felt safe. And she keeps on thinking of how she can get back to that in some way, as this is some kind of idea of safety and home. So that's one thing, one element to her character. Another element to her character is the Targaryen, I will claim what is mine by fire and blood. I don't think we can get away from that. She is saying that in a very entitled way, the throne, the right to rule every single person on this entire continent is mine. And if you will not let me have this, then I will kill you. That is basically what she is saying, and that is another aspect to her character. A third aspect to her character is this sense of a need for justice and a need to do right. We see it particularly with her attitudes towards slaves. It is nothing short of revolutionary what she does around Slavers Bay, and she is really just basically trying to take all of Essos and get rid of slavery, and that is undoubtedly a noble intention of hers that we shouldn't try and diminish in any way. So we've got these kind of three different elements to her character that are all there, and at different points in the story, one of them's uppermost and another one's sort of down. But we shouldn't try and pretend that some of those aren't there. They are all there. They are all parts of her character. Let's Kat May, thank you so much for the super chat. When Robert Baratheon sends assassins after Dany, Ned's full of guilt and thinks of Lyanna and broken promises. Jon was safe, so why do you think Ned connects Dany's death to a broken promise to Lyanna? Okay, so it's a good question. I don't think it's, and I would have to read that section exactly. I don't think that he immediately connects that with the broken promise, but he clearly gets very worked up by this idea that Robert Baratheon will kill Targaryen children. And Dany at that point, effectively, yes, she was a bit older by then, obviously, but she was still one of the Targaryen children. And that is understandable. There's a very clear link in his mind to protecting Jon. So if Robert Baratheon found out about Jon, Ned thought this was all perhaps behind him, but this is very clear evidence that Robert Baratheon would still kill Jon. So that's why that was there. In terms of the broken promise, I actually did a video on this, I can't remember, a few months ago. The promises that Ned made to Lyanna, we tend in our mind, and I deliberately said promises because I think it was more than one promise, we tend to just think of it as being, I promise that I'll protect Jon. But that seems not to be the case. So it seems to be, yes, I will protect Jon. He seems to have promised that he would take Lyanna's body up to Winterfell. And I think, reading between the lines, as I say, if you want my full theory on why this is the case, but reading between the lines, there are very strong hints that he also promised that he would tell Jon who he is when he's old enough. That, for me, is exactly the kind of thing that a dying Lyanna would make Ned promise. Not just protect my child, but make sure he knows who he is when he gets older. So that is a broken promise that Ned has, because he has not told him. And that is, he starts getting these thoughts of broken promises really when he's in the black cells. That is the time when he's angst-ridden about this, because Jon will never know. So that's where it is. But most of all, this is a connection for Ned about the fact that Robert Baratheon is still trying to kill Targaryen children, and that means that he would kill Jon. I think I had one more question. Dominic Vaughan, thank you so much. I've had a couple of questions from you, or at least one question, I think, over on Patreon, so I shall come to them, but I'll get to this one now. Who do you think Quaithe is, i.e. not Shira Seastar, and how does she tie into the Dany character arc? Is she tied to R'hllor or something else? Well, I'm probably going to disappoint you. I think the most likely person is Shira Seastar, if it's anyone. Now, when I say if it's anyone, it is entirely possible this is a new character called Quaithe. It's not somebody mysteriously pretending to be someone else. And I think this is a trap we often fall into with George R. R. Martin, because there are so many characters disguised as other characters. That the moment a new character appears, our first thought is, who's that really? That can't just be a new person. That must be someone else secretly. So I think there's a very good chance this is just Quaithe, just somebody who has, as Melisandre did, studied all of the ancient texts. We know Quaithe is a Shadowbinder, so she's from the Shadowlands, from Ashai, that part of the world. She may have just read the same kind of books and come to the same sorts of conclusions that Melisandre did, but just instead of thinking, oh, it must be Stannis, she comes and thinks, oh, it must be that. So we have to accept the possibility that might be all that it is. It isn't anyone else. The reason why I say if it's anyone, I like the idea that this is Shira Seastar, is because of and George R. R. Martin loves doing this kind of thing, but it's the balance that we've got, which is Bloodraven clearly thinks that the person that he has to back to save the world is Jon. The person who is playing the same sort of role with Daenerys is Shira Seastar, pushing her along to do the things to get over to Westeros and all the rest of it. Now, why that balance works well is because Bloodraven and Shira Seastar were lovers. They're brother and sister, half brother and half sister, but they were also lovers. And we know that Bloodraven has tried to contact people in the past and failed. So if he was going to try and contact anyone, it would probably be Shira Seastar. If he has failed, that may well be because she has been all the way over in Ashai. And I love this kind of parallelism that we might have, that she, using her magical arts, because she was a magic user, using her magical arts has prolonged her life. He, with his magical arts, has prolonged his life, being hooked up to the Weirwood network. And they have both, because they were close to start with, they have both come to the conclusion that we do need to have this kind of prince that was promised Azor Ahai figure that comes from the line of Aerys and Rhaella down to their children. It's just that they've got different people. They've backed different horses. So that is what works for me at a more thematic level. But as I say, it's entirely possible it is just a character called Quaithe, who we didn't know about before. I think that's me caught up on questions in the chat. I also had one super chat and a couple of super stickers actually from Maura Lee. Thank you so much. Before we went on air, saying just my usual show of immense love, admiration and support for both channels and all the excellent content and fabulous stories. Thank you for all you're doing to keep us entertained. Thank you, Maura. I really appreciate that. That's you know how much I appreciate your support. Thank you. That's incredibly generous. 26 Art Girl saying, just a wish to say, give some love to Dan the dog. I lost my sweet Sheltie Charlotte last Wednesday, and I know how much Dan means to you too. Well, I'm very sorry if you lost your dog. Dan is a very special dog, and so my heart goes out to you. It's like losing a member of your family. But Dan is well. He's had a couple of scrapes recently, but he is doing well and is currently fast asleep. Bless him. Stephen Dillon saying, do you think Jon will ride on one of Dany's dragons? Rhaegal ? Yes, I think probably he will at the end of it. I think that the symmetry works well, obviously being named after his father. This seems to be also one of the things, how will we be able to tell if somebody's a true Targaryen or whatever? How do the dragons react to them? So I think, yes, probably he will. And that doesn't mean that dragon will survive. I suspect that dragon will again die. But what is likely, I think, is Dany will carry on riding Drogon. Rhaegal eventually will be ridden by Jon, perhaps only once or twice. And then the third one on the show, obviously, it was the Night King. I do wonder whether it would be Euron in the books. It's entirely possible. He's obviously trying to get hold of a dragon. He obviously is magical. And it kind of makes sense to me that you have this fire, and he's got a lot of ice symbolism about him. And Dany's got the fire, and Jon has got the balance of ice and fire. So that kind of works as three different dragon riders. Okay, let's get to some questions from my patrons. Floris the Fox saying Tyrion ? This is, I assume, in relation to the what I was saying about the. You can tell whether someone's a Targaryen by how they react to them. Yeah, certainly on the show we saw that the dragons sniffed him and didn't shoot fire at him. I think we're nowhere near that yet in the books, but I think that there's a chance a similar-ish scene might happen. It's entirely possible. That was sort of a nod, I think, to what happens with Quentin Martell, who goes out and effectively tries to tame a dragon, thinking that because he's got some Targaryen blood in him a few generations back, that this will mean that he can just naturally tame a dragon. He can't. That did not end well for him. Yes, I would not surprise me if there's a sort of a nod to this idea that maybe there's some more to Tyrion. I don't think we're going to get a final answer, by the way, on Tyrion's parentage. I think that George R.R. Martin will leave that one open, but there's a possibility that we'll get sort of another little hint about something going on there. And Maura-Lee, thank you. I thought you weren't going to be able to watch this until afterwards. But thank you so much in the chat saying, just a show of appreciation for all the great A Song of Ice and Fire videos and Westworld content. Yeah, 2 more weeks to go on Westworld. And it has been renewed. For those, sorry, just slight digression, just in case you haven't heard. I was a bit concerned about Westworld, whether it was going to be renewed, because they hadn't announced it all the way through this season. Ratings have been down a bit. It's still high quality in my view, but ratings have been down a bit, so I was a little uncertain. But they have announced that, yes, it has been renewed for season 4, so I'm very excited about that. But we have 2 more episodes in this season, and if they keep up the same kind of routine, then I think we're looking at two years away before we get the next season anyway. But that was great news. It's been renewed. Dominic Vaughan says, how much do you envisage the Dosh Khaleen and getting from the current point to being able to launch an invasion will differ from the show? And if so, how? Okay, so this is picking up from where we're at. As I say, Dany will almost certainly get captured by the, he's basically there already, by the Dothraki, taken up to Vaes Dothrak, because that's where they think that she should be. She is the an ex-Khaleesi, so to speak, and this is where ex-Khaleesi's go. So she will get taken up there. We have got, and we'll come back to this, I'm sure, later, but we have got one of the visions from the House of the Undying, most of which seem reasonably sound. One of them is about people coming out from a lake and bowing before her. And that feels very much like what we might see happen at Vaes Dothrak. She will, I think, light a fire and burn the Carls. I think that the lake there is called the Womb of the World. This is where the Dothraki believe that everything started, from that central place there. And she will, I think, take control of the Dothraki nation at that point in roughly the same way that happened on the show. I don't think we're going to get this kind of Jorah and Dario coming and finding her, or all the rest of it. I think that she will just do it all on her own. The question then is what she does. Where does she go? Yes, she's then got the Dothraki, but it's a really quite roundabout route if you actually look on the map to bring them all the way down to Meereen, then put them on boats and then take them all the way across to Westeros. It would make a lot more sense if she says, okay, you just head west. You just go straight west. I'll pick you up somewhere around Pentos, which ties in with something we're going to be talking about a little bit later as well, about which other cities might Dany stop off at en route to Westeros. So it wouldn't surprise me if she parts ways, but she comes back on Drogon to Meereen to see what's going on and to finally pick up on this idea of her heading over to Westeros. Which ties in with Chase saying, I've been loving the weekly routine of these streams. What do you think Dany will do? You're very welcome, by the way. What do you think Dany will do when she returns to Meereen and starts heading off to Westeros? There are a few slave cities on the way. Yep, so as I say, we'll get to this. Now then, do you think we'll see some fire and blood in, for example, Volantis before she gets to King's Landing? Okay, so as I said, there is a battle which is going to happen at the beginning of the Winds of Winter. We see some of it in the pre-release chapters of the Winds of Winter. And basically, it's going to get a bit complicated because we've got the Yunkish who are there besieging the city. Barristan Selmy's leading a sort of a sally forth from the city to try and stop these catapults that are flinging plague bodies into the city. There are various sellsword companies around, some of which have been hired by the Yunkish, others that are just sort of hedging their bets, waiting to see which way the battle's going to go. This is where Tyrion is, incidentally. And then we also get the Ironborn arriving, Victarion, and they seem to be attacking the Yunkish. So what will almost certainly happen is that we get the Yunkish will be repelled, and Meereen is still not going to be in a great state. But when Daenerys returns, she suddenly finds this whole series of people that want to talk to her and want things from her. She's going to have Tyrion, she's going to have Jorah, she's going to have probably Barristan Selmy, assuming he survives the battle. She'll have Victarion if he's there. She will have possibly Marwyn the Mage who's arrived there. She's got this whole series of people who are all going to be arriving. And this was, George R. R. Martin talked about the Meereenese knot, which was what he said was the problem of what took him so long writing the last book, was because he got himself in a bit of a tangle trying to work out what order all of these different people were going to be arriving in Meereen and how that impacts on what Daenerys is doing. And it took him a very long time to work it all out. Where we're going to end up is that, yes, these people arrive at different orders, but I think most of them are there for when Dany returns. The Victarion will be very easily seen through. He will try and claim dragons. He will try and claim Daenerys. She will not be having any of that. If he survives that long, she will then suddenly get herself the Iron Fleet. So she's got a whole load of boats, and she will be able to hire some sellswords, and she's got the Unsullied, and she will then be able to get a fleet of together that will take her off and around the south of Essos. The question is, what else does she want to do before she lands in Westeros? Now, I think that she won't just leave the other slave cities, Yunkai and Astapor, just forget about them. I think that she will have her. But basically, they've double-crossed her several times now. I think she will have her revenge on them. I think that they will be razed to the ground. She's threatened it before. I think that there's something along those lines will happen there. So there's that. Then we've got Karth also joining in the battle. I don't think she'll go all the way back to Karth to deal with them, but maybe. Astapor, though, huge city, and they are sending a fleet to go and attack Meereen. Now, it may well be that when Dany arrives back, we've already had this one battle in Meereen. There's going to be another one arriving because the fleet. Sorry, I said Astapor, Volantis. The fleet from Volantis will have arrived, which is going to be a large fleet. Now, I think that she will destroy that fleet, or perhaps just take control of it, and then she has to go past Volantis on the way. It may well be that she burns part of Volantis. Volantis is set up quite well if you are wanting to target your ire on just the slave owners. They've got the black walls of Volantis, which is just this basically this sort of oval of ancient walls within which that's where the slave owners are, and everyone around the outside are not generally slave owners. So she could just burn that bit within the black walls. That obviously is not going to guarantee that she won't kill any innocents, because there are obviously slaves within there as well as the slave owners. But it's certainly a thing that she could do. And what we may well see is this kind of slippery slope from something that you think is entirely justified. Yunkai has been besieging her city and throwing plague bodies into it, and yes, it makes entire sense to end that war by killing off the Yunkish. What about Volantis? Well, okay, so they tried attacking her too, so maybe, but if you target it just in one area, yes, you'll get some casualties that you shouldn't, but is that justified? Perhaps. And then you can, I'm imagining this kind of slippery slope of going down. Each time she destroys another city, if she does, it's slightly less justifiable. The other place which is possible that she might go to is Pentos. Firstly, as I said, because the Dothraki, it makes sense just to send the Dothraki there and pick them up and carry them across from there. And secondly, because Barristan Selmy has actually, in order to try and get the Windblown on his side, which is a sellsword company, he has promised to put their leader, the Tattered Prince, in charge of Pentos. And so it would kind of make sense that she stops off there or gets the Dothraki to take out the city and then install a new leader. So that is quite possible. So Pentos doesn't have hugely impressive defenses. They tend to rely on bribes and just largesse to keep the Dothraki happy, as we saw at the very beginning of the books, that this was Pentos where they were, where Illyrioma Patis was, and the idea was that the Khalasar came and they just gave them lots of gifts and said, hey, come here, stay in this wonderful plaza area and all the rest of it. So that was how Pentos deals with it. But if Dany tells them to destroy the city, then no amount of gifts will be good enough. So there are a certain number of places that she could well stop off and overthrow or destroy or do something like that. I don't think we know enough yet about the exact context to know how she's going to deal with those cities, but she definitely will deal with Astapor, Yunkai, Volantis, and probably Pentos as well. So there's a lot that she's going to be dealing with before she gets anywhere near Westeros. I think I had another question in the chat. Let me just see if I can find it. Sean Patton saying, hey mate, great work, thank you. Will Dawn turn on Dany when she arrives in Westeros after the death of Quentyn? And if so, the obvious choice is to join their power with Aegon. Love your thoughts on this. Yeah, so I did a video on this. I think I've released it. Again, I'm producing quite a lot of videos at the moment, so sometimes I have to suddenly think, did I release that one yet? I have. This is a really interesting point. So Doran Martell sent Quentyn Martell, his son, over to Meereen with a view to saying, hey, do you want to join forces? Because Doran hates the Lannisters. He wants to get Dorne back into power. And his general default way of trying to do this is marrying off his family into the Targaryen family. That seems to be his style. And he had got this plan with his daughter Arianne and Viserys, and they got a deal there, but that obviously all fell through because Viserys died. So he sends Quentyn off to basically say, hey, why don't we do this, but with me and you, Daenerys, rather than those two. And we can combine forces, the Dornish and the Targaryens, and we can retake Westeros. That was the plan. He arrived, and he's a bit of a dull character, poor guy. He's very earnest. He's doing what he thinks is the right thing, but at the same time, he's not particularly charismatic and not necessarily the cleverest. He's just very, very eager to please his father and do his duty and things like that. He arrives over, he presents himself to Daenerys, and she basically says, no, sorry, I've already decided I'm marrying Hisdar. I'm marrying this noble here in Meereen. I'm staying here. Thank you for the support, but that's not going to happen. So his reaction is, well, I have to try and prove myself somehow. That's when he goes and tries to tame a dragon, and the dragon kills him. Now, what happens next is that Barristan Selmy, who, as I say, is sort of, he's appointed himself hand of the Queen and is therefore running things in her name. He says, because he's honourable in his own way, he says, we have to send the body back. This is a noble family, the Martells. They will want their son's body to be returned to them. So he is sending the body back. I think that he eventually decided, I'll just send the bones back, not just like this burned up crisp of a thing from the dragons. But he's going to send the bones back to Dorne, and he will have to include some kind of cover letter that says, Daenerys says thanks, but no thanks. So when that does arrive in Dorne, that's going to be roughly the same time as Arianne, another one of Doran's children, meets up with Aegon, and he will be on a bit of a roll. We've found that he's invaded. He's already got the Golden Company, who, forget what they were like on the show, are an absolutely top draw sellsword company. They've taken Storm's End, which is a hugely difficult castle to take, and people are starting to rally around them. So I think it's going to be a pretty simple decision for Doran Martell to say, I'm no longer going to be backing Daenerys. As far as I'm aware, she's actually dead now, because he will probably have got the rumors as well that she went flying off in a dragon, and people think that she might be dead. She's not returned. No one knows where she is. It's a pretty simple decision for him to actually throw his weight behind Aegon, and yeah, he will therefore be opposing Daenerys when she arrives with her invasion much later. So, and Turbo saying it's safe to say Dawn will back the loser. Yes, I think it's probably fair to say that it's Doran Martell. The thing that I found when I did that mini-series on Doran Martell's plans is that you find that he's sort of built up as this great and subtle player of the Game of Thrones, but then you look at it and you go, well, okay, so the first plan from the Martells was to marry Elia into the Targaryen family. That didn't work. She died. The Uncle Lewin died. The two kids died. Then there was the plan to marry Arianne off to Viserys. Viserys died. Then there was a plan to send Quentyn off to marry Daenerys. Quentyn died. Oberyn went to try and get a little bit of justice against the Lannisters. He did get some justice, but he also died. really what we've got is just this litany of failure from Doran Martell. He may have this reputation of being a great and subtle player of the game, but he's not got many wins to his name. Let's put it that way. He's been losing for quite some time, so there's a fair chance that yes, he will be backing the wrong horse in this one. Okay, let's go to some more questions from my patrons. Morally saying, on the show we saw the Ironborn fleet of ships with Theon and Yara as part of the military might that Dany was taking with her back to Westeros. Who do you think Dany will be able to count on? Which houses? So this is a really fun question, because I think the answer is not a lot. She will be invading with the Dothraki, which is a massive nation. She's got the Unsullied on her side. I think that she will have some people, some sellsword companies, and I think that there's a fair chance that she may well also get a lot of support from the Red Priests. Among the list of people, I should have included Mokoro, who is a Red Priest who has been sent there specifically to be helping her because they believe that she is the Princess was promised, Azor Ahai Reborn. And so they will be supporting getting her over to Westeros. And so I think that she will get explicitly support from the Red Temples coming across. Melisandre is a rogue priestess. She's gone out. She wasn't told to do what she did. Her view is against the main view of what the rest of the religion believes. So don't think that they're all going to follow in behind her. She's gone off grid with her own plans here. So yeah, Dany is going to come across with a lot of people from Essos. In terms of support, when she gets to Westeros, I think the short answer is probably not a lot, because the North is not really going to be thinking about that. They're focused on what's happening to the North. This is why it will be politically good for her to be meeting up with Jon and all the rest of it to try and get the North there. As long as Littlefinger's around, his plan is to tie the Vale in with the North. The Riverlands are currently under Lannister control. The Lannisters certainly aren't going to support her. I've already talked about Dorne. The Tyrells are currently with the Lannisters, but I suspect that they will switch sides. It's possible that they could switch to Daenerys, but it's more likely that they will switch to Aegon. And obviously the Ironborn, as it is, are under Euron's leadership, and Euron's not going to bow to anyone. So she is not going to have much support from Westeros. She is going to appear like she's some sort of conqueror from abroad, bringing lots of strange peoples that no one really knows who they are, but they're a bit scared of. So she is going to appear like a foreign conqueror, which is a bit like Aegon did, because he came from Essos originally. Yes, the family stayed at Dragonstone for a while, but that's still an island off the coast. So that is the feel. Whereas Fagon, he will start picking up people who are Westerosi. He already has around him. He's got John Connington with him, who is well known as the Westerosi. He's got the Golden Company are exiles from Westeros. They come from Essos, but they are exiles from Westeros. And then if he starts gathering people like Dorne and all the rest of it, it will feel like this is a Targaryen restoration rather than Daenerys, who has actually never even set foot on the mainland of Westeros at this point. She will look more like a foreign invader. That was certainly on the show. This was a card that that Cersei was trying to play, was, oh, look at this foreign invader coming over. That, I think, is going to be one of the things which comes out in the books. Okay, let's get back to some more questions from my patrons. Dominic Vaughan do you think we will get closure or exposition on all of her visions from the House of the Undying, i.e. the White Lion, 3 betrayals, 3 mounts, etc.? So the visions from the House of the Undying, as I said, that we can broadly trust. And when I say broadly, that doesn't mean we have to believe every single thing. Some of them are futures that could have happened but didn't. Like, for example, there's one that is very clearly Rhaego, her child with Khal Drogo, who obviously didn't grow up, but in this vision he did, and so Dany saw what he would have looked like had he grown up. So they're not all 100% exactly right, but the ones that are sort of more, you must do this, 3 fires, you must light 3 treasons, you must suffer, things like this. Those things will be shown to happen. But the way that George R. R. Martin tends to work with this is that it's not going to be 100% clear. We will be able to look back on them and go, once something's happened, look back and go, oh yeah, that kind of fits. But even then, we're probably not going to be 100% sure on how all of these things. So in terms of closure, I'm not sure that we will necessarily. But in terms of the whether the story will show through all of those things, I think that yes, but by the end of it, we will be able to see that this has been a constant thread running through her story. What she saw back in the House of the Undying will be very clearly what has been happening. The big thing I think that we need to look out for, we've already got things like, you know, the three mounts you must ride, and we've got the white horse that she was riding. She's got her dragon. What other thing perhaps that she will ride? That's something to look out for. The 3 fires, I think, is the key one here, because this is not with Daenerys. This is not setting things alight with her dragons. She does that all the time, but her personally lighting fires doesn't happen all the time. We get one example when we get lighting the fire of Khal Drogo's funeral pyre. That's the first one. The second one, I suspect, will be burning the Khals. And then it's the third one, which is the one which I suspect, and I did a video on this years ago called Will Jon Kill Daenerys, based on these visions. And that comes out to the idea that perhaps mirroring the Azor Ahai legend that we have, that a sword was thrust into a woman and brought forth, and it was Lightbringer. Lightbringer is a fiery sword. Perhaps she gets stabbed and lights the sword, and that is the third fire that she must light, because her burning things with her dragons is not the answer to any of these visions. Higa Herga, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, going to the office for my usual amount. Excellent as always. Her visions will be clear as mud. Yes, I think that's right. We will be able to look back on them and say, I think this is how they fit. Even then, we probably won't be 100% certain, but that's where we will be able to look back on them. I think it's harder looking forwards and saying exactly what's going to happen on all of these. So the reason why that's important is that it means that although she may want them to guide her, she won't have enough information for that to actually be useful, to be helping her in any way. It's only when she looks back she'll be able to go, oh yeah, so that's that. The difference with this, though, I will come on to, we're going to talk about Quaithe a lot later, I think, but the difference with the Quaithe things is that they are very specific, and you will be able to tell who she's referring to. I am sure Dany will start working it out. You know, when she's talking about the perfumed seneschal and the griffin and the the lion and things like that. These are the things that she will be able to start figuring out who they are, and that will then be able to guide her reactions. Because if she realizes people that she can't trust, and then more people on this list appear, she will go, I can't trust them because Quaithe told me not to. Patricia Olbert says, hi, Robert. How do you think Dany and young Griff will react to each other? They are competitors for the throne, but at the same time, they might regard each other as survivors from the same family, especially since Dany is feeling quite lonely and longs for some sort of a family. This, I think, is going to be the crux of Dany's story. It's probably actually going to be the beginning of A Dream of Spring rather than in the Winds of Winter. And the reason I say that, because although this is going to be a massive book, when you start plotting what story has to happen for Daenerys, she's going to have chapters up in the Dothraki Sea. Then she's got to come back. She's got lots of people to meet in Meereen. We've got all of this business that we've been talking about, dealing with potentially the Slaver cities, Volantis, possibly Pentos. By the time she's got all the way over to Dragonstone or wherever she does land, then this is months. This is at least a year of sea travel, of organizing, of fights, of flights across the land. This is going to take a long time for her to get there. So I don't think that we're going to get the bulk of the action for her on Westeros until the final book. I think that it's the final book that, if I had to guess, then will end the Winds of Winter when the others come south of the Wall and when Dany and the dragons arrive at Westeros. That seems to be the last, the most sensible point to put the cutoff between those two books. So the question of how Dany and young Griff will react to each other boils down to the fact of what the situation will be when she gets there. So young Griff will at that point be installed as king, I suspect. He will probably be in King's Landing. He will probably have a lot of the support from across the southern part of the Seven Kingdoms, pardon me. So I think that he is going to be where she always envisaged herself to be. Now, there will necessarily be a meeting, but he is one of the people that Quaithe has warned her to watch out for. So this is immediately she's going to be slightly suspicious. One of the things that one of the titles that Dany gets in the House of the Undying is Slayer of Lies. She is going to be a person who shows up lies, and I think that it is going to be become apparent that he is not actually who he says he is. He is not actually Aegon VI. He is a Blackfire descendant. Now, how she finds this out, I don't know. Maybe it's this thing with dragons, that the dragons take a sniff of him and it doesn't seem quite right. I don't know. But she will decide that he is not actually her nephew. He is not actually the person who should be ruling, and so therefore she will probably try and get him out. That the people, however, will probably be on his side, because he is almost certainly going to be a good ruler. That all the rumors that all the sort of the hints that we've got through the books are that he's been learning, he's been understanding what it means to be a good ruler. He's been understanding what it means to be living among the poor and the small folk. He is going to have all the hallmarks of being a good ruler, and the people probably will love him. We get told that he's going to be among cheering crowds, and then suddenly Daenerys is going to appear, and dragons are going to be flying across the skies. People will be scared of Daenerys, and they will be looking to Fagon to be protecting them. So that is going to be the crux of how their dynamic is going to go. Zachary Kronish says, early on in Game of Thrones, it seems like Dany, or at that point Viserys, was the end goal to Varys and Illyrio's plan. Why no mention of Aegon? And how does Dany fit into Varys and Illyrio's plan in general? Well, their plan does shift a bit, but it does seem to be based on this idea that we can, that Aegon should marry Daenerys. That seems to be their sort of golden aim, what they would really like. I think that Illyrio and Varys they're sensible enough to know that if Daenerys has got these dragons, then they need her on side. They can't just, dragons are they're game changers. They can't just pretend that they're not there. So they had ideally that when they sent young Griff down to Volantis, it's because they'd heard a rumor that she was going to be there, and that was the idea, was that he would meet up with her and they would form an alliance, and ideally they would get married. So that was the idea. She wasn't there. They slightly changed plans around. He's invading. So I think that the idea is that when she arrives, Varys will be trying to broker some kind of understanding, a shared rule kind of idea, something along those lines. But again, coming back to it, Quaithe has said, beware the perfumed seneschal. She's not going to be trusting Varys. So yes, the plan is a little bit confusing. I don't think that they at any point actually actively wanted Viserys to be king. I think they all saw what he was like. I think that, however, he was potentially able to act as a figurehead, and they could definitely, to say, they could use him to be getting the Dothraki across. So that was the idea originally, and then the more powerful Dany has come with her dragons, with her legions of soldiers and all the rest of it, the more that Daenerys has been becoming a part of this. It's now they can't just pretend she doesn't exist. So they have shifted around a bit, but the plan was always from the start to get Aegon onto the throne. And maybe they could use Viserys to actually launch a big invasion, but the end game for them was always to get Fagon onto the throne. Question from Jared saying, how do you think Dany's interactions with the North, Jon, Sansa, and the others, will differ between the books and the show? Will she still face the same obstacles? Roughly, but I think I think Jon will come down to Dragonstone. It makes sense that Daenerys takes Dragonstone. It's not a particularly easily defendable castle, so whoever owns it at the time, it has been shifting around a little bit, but whoever owns it at the time probably will lose out to Dany when she arrives, and it is her ancestral home and her birthplace, incidentally. So that makes sense that she goes there. It makes sense that Jon comes down to try and get the Dragonglass when they realize that there's this whole army coming at them, and the only way to defeat this army is through things like Valyrian steel, of which they can get their hands on a few weapons from Valyrian steel, or Dragonglass. And there is a Dragonglass mine that we've already had mention of it. Then I think that it makes sense for him to go down and try and get some of this Dragonglass. So that seems about right. It also seems about right that Dany's advisors will see the political gain for her in some kind of alliance with the North, because, as I said, if you look all the way across the south to Dorne, the Reach, the Lannisters, the Iron Islands, none of these are going to be supportive of Dany. If she's going to have any support, it has to be through some sort of political marriage. The North if it brings with it the veil as well, would be a big win for her. So I think that's kind of scenario is still going to be there. I think, yes, that they will, the two of them probably will meet up and fall in love. It will feel, George R. R. Martin's a better writer than that, but the risk is that it will feel rushed because it's only going to be in this last one book. But it will, I'm sure, be a very large book. So, and if John heads down quite early on, then we're going to have a connection between the two of them which does last this entire story, which the entire final book, which will be, guessing at 1,500 pages or more. It's going to be quite big. Now, in terms of Sansa, Sansa will stay up north for as long as possible. With the others, my feeling is that it's possible that they may well head down. There's lots of hints that actually in the books, the final confrontation may be around this kind of central area where we've got the Inn at the Crossroads, Harrenhal, the Isle of Faces, and all the rest of it. Dany's had a vision of this already. So it's possible that she is forced into joining forces with Jon and the North, not just through political expediency, though that will be a reason, but also because the threat is actually not just somewhere up north, it's actually coming all the way down south. When you think about it, if you look at Westeros, the fact on the show that the Army of the Dead only made it down as far as Winterfell, that's only like a fraction of the way down Westeros. It would be a much, much bigger thing if they made it all the way down, passed through the neck and all the way down into the Riverlands, threatening all of Westeros, not just stopping right up in the north. Colin Oliver saying, "Hi, Robert, long-time watcher, new Patreon supporter. Welcome. Fantastic to have you on board. The realization of the Azor Ahai prophecy seems to be a huge focus point for the coming War of the Dawn, as well as for us in the real world. As readers, we know that there are two people who do or will fit the prophecy, Dany and Jon. If it is either of them, which one does the text most support? And as a fan, who would you want to be Azor Ahai?" Okay. This is one of those things with prophecy. I think that you can make a case for either of them, which is why we have got Bloodraven supporting Jon, why we've got Quaithe supporting Dany, and why we've got Melisandre, who has studied these kind of texts as much as anyone else, supporting Stannis. Melisandre gets a lot of stuff wrong, but there are reasons why you could say it might be him. Now, that means it's quite vague. It's quite open to interpretation. If you had to pick one, it depends on which bits of prophecy you're emphasizing. Dany she's got the being born on Dragonstone. She's brought dragons to life from stone, so she's got all of that business going for her. Jon, you have to look slightly more thematically to get some of the links across to him, but he is indeed coming down through the right line from the prince that was promised. So it could be either character, and he is the person who seems to be situated to be fighting the others up in the north. Now, so you could make a case for either. My take is that George R. R. Martin doesn't just take, this isn't just like a prophecy that we get in Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or something where you can very clearly see it is this. He is going to leave it open. He is going to allow us to interpret it the way we want. And his interest in this is not so much in the absolute truth of the prophecy, yes or no. It is in how does this drive people. And this drives people by the fact that Bloodraven thinks it's Jon, affects how Bloodraven is running the whole continent. he's pulling strings all over the place to do this. The fact that Quaithe thinks it's Dany, it would appear, impacts on how she is trying to push her to do certain things. The fact that Melisandre thinks it's Stannis is driving everything that she's been doing. So what he cares about as a writer is not so much is it this or that. He cares about the actions and the beliefs of the characters. And so that is what seems to be driving it. At the end of all of this, I'm absolutely convinced we will still be debating who was Azor Ahai reborn, if anyone. The answer is it doesn't matter. What matters is what the characters believed, not the kind of absolute truth. These stories are not written as an absolute truth. They're all written from people's perspectives. Every chapter is from a different person's perspective. And that is what George R. R. Martin is trying to be putting across to us. This is a matter of perspective. And the important thing is how people react to it. The Dancing Rat, thank you so much, saying, hi, Robert. The Dosh Khaleen prophesied that Dany's child would be the stallion who mounts the world. Do you think there's any chance that it was a valid prophecy, but about a future child instead of Rhaego? Possibly, but I think this ties in really well, actually, with what I was just saying, is the important point here is not so much the right and wrong of this prophecy. The important point is that what does this drive people to do? And Miri Mazdur heard this prophecy that her child would be the stallion that mounts the world. And she goes, well, what does that actually mean? That means this person is going to be leading the Dothraki, pillaging across the continent. They're going to be destroying lives, taking people into slavery, because this is what the Dothraki do. We sort of saw a tame-ish version of them on the show with just like maybe a little few hints here or there that maybe they attack a village every now and then. They've wiped out civilizations. They've ripped across the entire continent of Essos, the Dothraki nation. They've destroyed cities and ground them into dust. They have taken entire peoples and sold them into slavery down in Slaver's Bay. That's how the slave trade works in Essos. It's not just, Slaver's Bay, they happen to have slaves. They have slaves because the Dothraki attack villages and take people prisoner and then take them down and sell them off. That's what it is. And so George R. R. Martin's take on all prophecy seems to be, it's not about the truth of the prophecy, it's about how that impacts on people's motivations. And the important point here is how it impacted on Miri Mazdur and her choice, therefore, that she would not allow that to happen. Therefore, she killed Rhaego. That's the long and short of it, is that was she heard the prophecy and said, I'm not going to allow that to happen, so stopped it. Could this be a sort of a reference, if we try and take a step back away from that and say a reference to a future child? I don't think Daenerys will have a child in this story. She may become pregnant, but I don't think she's going to have a child in it. So I think the short answer on that one is no, but it's about the intention of the people believing the prophecy or not. That's the important point here. Rebe Reyes, didn't see a question attached to the super chat. Thank you so much for it. Having a quick look to see if you put it down underneath it. I can't see it, but thank you anyway. Delphi Morphia saying, oh, Daenerys will see in the glass candle about the genetic experiments beyond Ahai, breeding people and dragons, and the origin of her dragon blood, and that is how she will see through Phagon. Yeah, it's a good idea. So the talking about the genetic experiments with people and dragons, the second of my new series of I will answer this question properly in a moment, but it just reminded me of something. Second of my new series of videos, which is like a sort of a not live stream, a series of chats between me and other creators going through secrets of places or people within the world of Ice and Fire. Started off just yesterday, actually, Secrets of Winterfell. I had Joe Buckley, Professor Castle, he's been on a live stream before here, and I brought him back, and we had a great chat about Winterfell. Next week, I've got Amanda, the Disputed Lands, and we're talking about Secrets of Old Valyria. And we're going to be covering a whole load of this kind of stuff here about genetic experiments with dragons and humans and all the rest of it. So do look out for that if you're interested in that. The fact is, though, I think that that Fagon, young Griff, probably is a Blackfire descendant. Now, that sounds like a technicality, but actually, when you think about it, they might have a different surname, but they are descended from the Targaryens. So he has got Valyrian blood within him, and so that inheritance is still there. The question is whether or not it's enough for the dragons. So I like this idea. I don't think that the looking through the glass candles, what's going beyond a shy, possibly. I think with glass candles, you tend to need to know what you're looking for. We haven't found huge amounts of information about them yet, but with glass candles, you do seem to communicate and be able to see, but it's not just show me something that I would find useful. You have to know what you're looking for. So unless Quaithe guides her to show her something, which it's a possibility, this might be how George R. R. Martin gets around that to go west, you must go east kind of idea, that he sort of seemed to abandon partway through. Maybe she will be shown something in the east that will help persuade her of something. But if it is Quaithe, then we do have to question her motivations all the time. She will only be showing Daenerys things that she wants Daenerys to see. Quaithe is clearly manipulating Daenerys through here. Okay, but as I've started talking about what's going on the channel, I always roughly halfway through just very quickly say what's coming up. What's coming up tomorrow is my first part of my long-awaited Bloodraven series. This is Bloodraven's origins I'm covering first of all in this video, but then there's going to be 4 or 5 working through how Bloodraven has been manipulating events in Westeros, not just through this story, but for a century or so beforehand. So I've got the first one about his origins. I'm doing writing one now, which is about what I'm going to call the bloodline of the prince that was promised, or something along those lines. What actually happened with the Targaryen bloodline, which they had a huge family, and then suddenly they're down to just a couple of people with a very specific bloodline. And this is trying to work out what happened there and why, and what does that actually mean, and why do I think that Bloodraven's behind that. So we've got that. Then I'm going to be moving on further into how he's been doing things through Robert's Rebellion, how he's been manipulating the Starks in the story that we've got. So as I say, there are at least 4 parts to this, probably a little bit more. And I'm sneaking in somewhere in there, I'm going to do a video on Summerhall, because this is all tied in with the same kind of idea, I think. No spoilers there yet, but I think that Bloodraven definitely knew what was happening there. Let's put it that way. So I've got that, and regular Lord of the Rings videos coming along as well. The other thing I would say, because I say it every week, I mean it every week, patrons, thank you. I genuinely can't do what I do without your support. As you've been seeing from this live stream, one of the things I do for all of my patrons is, if you're a patron, then you get priority questions here on these live streams. So I collect questions from my patrons beforehand, and they are the structure for all of my live streams that I do here on Thursdays. There are other benefits at other levels. So at $5, you get access to all of the audio that I ever do for in Deep Geek. $10, you get a chance, you get a thank you in the description, and you get a chance every now and then to vote on future content, things like that. So if you want to support the channel, or if you want to get access to some of those benefits, there is a link down in the description. I think that's enough on what's coming up. Let's have a quick go back to questions from my patrons. Morley asks, who will become Dany's Hand of the Queen, Tyrion or someone else? I think it's quite likely it will be Tyrion. He is the of the people who are over there, he's the most suited to that role because he has been Hand of the King already. Daenerys will want people who understand Westeros around her, and the fact that he's a Lannister will sort of bolster her sort of credentials in a way that she's got a much more rounded group of people around her. It's quite a fun game to think about what her small council might look like, because she's going to start pulling one together. Barristan Selmy currently has this kind of Hand of the Queen role. He is an advisor, but he's actually probably better suited to either be heading up her Queen's Guard or being sort of Master of Arms or something along those lines. You've got Marwyn, who's coming across, who will appear to be taking a role of her Maester. Where does Tyrion fit in? Probably Hand of the Queen. That seems to be his most likely place. So yes, I think probably it's not definitely the case. And I think that there's a chance that Daenerys won't trust him 100% from the beginning, but feel that it's needed. Perhaps Barristan Selmy might put in a word and say, okay, yes, I know he's a Lannister, but he's always seemed to be like one of the good ones. So it's entirely possible that we might get there. The key point about Tyrion, and we'll do one of these ones, we'll do Tyrion in the Winds of Winter, but the key point about him is that he, more than any other character, is the person who connects everyone. And so this is where he's going to fit. So he started out, obviously he knows all the Lannisters and he's spent time in King's Landing. He's been up to Winterfell. He's met all the Starks. He's been up to the Wall, so he knows the Night's Watch. He's come out across and he's met and spent time with Varys and Illyrio's plans. So he's met young Griff, Fagon, John Connington, all of that lot. Now he's going to be coming over and meeting up with Daenerys. He is the person who can connect all the dots and join people together. And so he will, I am pretty sure, he will come across with Daenerys. His most likely role is being as Hand of the Queen, and she will trust him because of this ability to sort of link up with people. Leila Egushi, who I think I saw in the chat earlier, saying, my impression from the title, The Winds of Winter, is that all of the characters will begin to feel those winds blow in their direction. This makes me think of the Wall and Winterfell as being central. In the first book, we learn that a complete Valyrian scroll titled Airmidon's Engines of War exists at Winterfell. Do we know what happened to it? Does Tyrion have it? Did it burn in the library? Might it become relevant later? Well, first of all, that's very keen eyes to spot that one. Yeah, I think this is only mentioned that one time, and it was a sort of an in passing reference. This was way back. It was in Winterfell before Tyrion heads off up north to the Wall. He spends a night just reading stuff in the library at Winterfell, and as he's heading out, he sort of nudges a Septon who's being a bit sleepy and says, you might want to pack these away. This one's actually really old and valuable. I've never come across a full copy of it before. That's the extent to which we hear about that scroll. So may it come important later? Well, it's possible. We just do not know what happened to it. We don't know whether Tyrion took it. We don't hear that he did. There's a couple of fires happened in Winterfell after that. It's entirely possible that it could have burned. If it has survived, then yes, perhaps they will build some sort of war machines or something which might be able to help against the others. My general take, though, is that scene was as much about character building as anything else. So it was showing us that there is stuff in Winterfell. It was character building for Winterfell to start with, showing us that there is knowledge and things here in Winterfell that can't be found anywhere else. And secondly, it showed us who Tyrion was, because everybody was treating Tyrion as the poison dwarf. The Starks didn't like him or trust him. Clearly, the Lannisters, Cersei never had a great relationship with Tyrion, so nobody really liked him to start with. And we're through the book one. It's a process of us actually seeing beyond this to understand who he is as a person. And this is showing us that Tyrion is not just this drunken, debauched character. He's also the kind of person who will get lost in reading a book for an entire night and then suddenly realize that dawn is breaking. That's an important part of his character. So we were being shown this, and the fact that he knows that this is a rare volume, that this is something he's not heard of anywhere else, shows that not only is he the kind of person who might read all night, but he is knowledgeable about books, and he's been looking out for things. So that is telling us about who he is. So I think it's more about character development than it was about dropping in something, but I wouldn't say that we won't see it again, but I don't think it's central to the plot. Stephen Dillon saying, do you think Selmy will betray Dany for Fagon? Also, why did Illyrio send him to Dany instead of young Griff? Wouldn't a legit hero of the Kingsguard help young Griff's rep? Yeah, so the idea was that he would be able to sort of bring them together. This is it. He's already got somebody tutoring young Griff, John Connington. He's got a whole load of other people there. So they wanted him brought up in the way that he was being brought up. For him to be going over and supporting Daenerys will help her out. Will he betray her for Fagon? I don't think so. I think it's entirely possible that he could die over in Meereen. At the moment, we've not seen. Yes, we're getting all these kind of rumblings from the Sons of the Harpy and all the rest of it, but for it to actually matter, then we need to see characters that we know die. Otherwise, it just seems like okay, so there's a bit of local insurrection. So it would not surprise me if, as on the show, he does die at the hands of the Sons of the Harpy. Now, that would kind of make sense as well to Dany going, well, okay, here's this guy who has saved the city. It might be the last thing that she needed to push her over to go to Westeros, that they have rejected him, even though he saved the city from being attacked by the Yunkish, from having the plague bodies being sent in and all the rest of it. He's a hero, and yet they kill him. She clearly is never going to be welcome there. So that would make sense to me, actually, if he doesn't make it all the way back to Westeros. If he does, yes, I'm sure that Fagon would want him to be in his Kingsguard. That would make a lot of sense, but I don't think that that Barristan Selmy would immediately want to swap over. I think that he would be very suspicious. He was around at the time. He was injured, actually, so he probably wasn't there for the presentation, but everybody around was absolutely convinced that baby Aegon was dead. So this would have to be, he needs some big proof to show that this actually was who it was, who he claims to be. Donald, people saying Undoubtedly, he will have a better dialogue in the books, but will Tyrion's plans crumble during Dany's invasion like the show? Probably. I think one of the issues that we've got, or the show had, was the fact that because they took out this character of Fagon, then they had to move lots of things around. So if Fagon is going to have Dawn on his side, then that means that Dawn on the side of Daenerys. So then we get the Tyrells. Whose side are they going to be on? Well, they may well be on Fagon's side rather than Daenerys' side. So actually, we've got all the different characters are in different places. I could see that that Tyrion might come up with some grand plan for taking Casterly Rock. If Cersei has gone there, she may well have escaped back down there, and he may well claim that, but they could have escaped somewhere else. That is the kind of thing that might well be the case. I don't think that we're going to see Tyrion suddenly become stupid to just keep on suggesting bad things all the time and all the rest of it. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but she will be suspicious of him, I think, all the way through. I don't think that he's going to be one of the people that she's going to have around her most closely, the people that she trusts absolutely implicitly, people like Missandei. So I think that there are fewer things that he will be able to get wrong in the big way that he did on the show, because they had to somehow get, and this is why I'm saying that the big changes from the fact that Fagon wasn't there. Because Fagon wasn't there, she arrived with this massive, overwhelming force on the show that makes you go, well, hang on, how can you possibly lose if you've got 3 dragons, you've got Dawn, you've got the large chunks of the Iron Fleet, you've got the Tyrells, you've got all of these things. How can you possibly fail? And in order for her to fail, then she had to make that mistakes had to be made. I think that is not going to be the case in the books, because she's not going to be arriving with an overwhelming force. If anything, it's going to be Fagon who's got that force to start with. What she will have is dragons, and then the Dothraki, who won't be as easily held back, put it that way, as they were on the show. They became very tame on the show. So yeah, Tyrion is not going to get stupid in the books, but we will talk about Tyrion more maybe next week, maybe the week afterwards. Jazz Singh saying, how do you think George R. R. Martin will make Dany and Jon's relationship feel less tropey than the love at first sight scenario played out in the show? Could you see it being more of a political play by Dany attempting to gain favour of the North? Thanks from a new Patreon member. Welcome, first of all, for joining Patreon. I hugely appreciate that. I think, yes, as I said, I think that it will definitely have an element of a political play, because she will need allies, and the North is the most logical ally. Jon is the most logical person. He will, by this point, I suspect, yes, again, be King of the North, or certainly Lord of Winterfell. So it will make sense that there is a political thing there. I think that if you look at who Daenerys has gone for in the past, then she seems to go for fighting men, leaders of men, who like people like Dario, people like Khal Drogo. Jon is, yes, he's a lot more sort of earnest, but if he changes a bit, as he almost certainly will by what's going to happen to him, and he becomes more sort of wolf-like, then he becomes very much in that mold of a person that she finds attractive. So that will be there. And for Jon, what we know that he seems to find attractive, you get Ygritte, for example. He finds independent, strong women who don't just or they are willing to stand up to him, and that is definitely what he's going to have in Daenerys. So George R. R. Martin has set this up that it makes sense that they find each other attractive. I think that we will just see that they have to spend a lot of time with each other, and then very slowly they will fall in love. And it makes, I don't think it's going to feel as tropey as it did on the show. The reason why it felt really like that was because it was rushed. And this is, I always say I'm not going to get caught up in season 8 stuff, but if you think about the relationship that you had, it was even worse with Jaime and Brienne, don't get me going down that route, but with Jon and Daenerys, what we had in terms of a sight of them in a relationship together was less than one episode. There was this huge build-up, it's Jon and Daenerys going to get together and all the rest of it. It was at the end of season 7, almost the last scene of season 7, that they got together. So the first time we actually saw them as a couple was in episode 1. And by the end of episode 1, Jon has already had the news about, oh, by the way, she's your aunt. So we get less than one episode of them together. And that is why it felt rushed and not natural. That's not going to be how it's going to be in the books. It's going to be a lot longer. Put it that way. Now, connected to that, Venus Lima says, hi, Robert. Do you think that Jon has more or less story with Dany in the books than the show, or did Jon get some of Fagon's plot? Thank you for all you do. New patron. Welcome to you as well. It's fantastic. 3 new patrons asking questions, which I love. So, did Jon get some of Fagon's plot? No, I don't think so. I think that they've just, broadly speaking, I've already explained roughly what I think is going to happen, but broadly speaking, Fagon was cut out of the show. They didn't feel that they had extra plot to give, bits of his plot to give to other people. There are knock-on implications of that with Dawn and the Tyrells and all the rest of it, but Jon, no, his story is all the way up in the north, and then he's going to come down looking for Dragonglass. That's not a Fagon storyline. Fagon's storyline is he appears, comes over from Essos in this invasion, and takes Storm's End and then probably King's Landing. That's his storyline. Jon is not getting that storyline. He is not going to find out that he is a Targaryen until later on. No. And so he's definitely not going to be trying to take King's Landing and claim the throne. Certainly not then, and almost certainly not ever. Leaf Underhill says, hope you're doing well. Thank you, I am. Do you think hearing bells and flipping out and burning in the show came from something George R. R. Martin said about Jon Connington, his trauma from the Battle of the Bells getting triggered? Do you think Dany will be blamed for burning done by Jon Connington, or blamed for burning that's necessary for stopping the spread of grayscale, or just blamed for accidentally setting off wildfire, or some combination? Quite possibly. Now, I think that she will try and get Fagon, once she's decided that Fagon is a fake, I think she will try and get him out of King's Landing. I think that the people will not want her to. I think that they will take Fagon's side over her, and so she will have to take by force rather than anything else, and that will mean Dragonfire. That doesn't mean that she's just going to suddenly flip and burn the whole city. I don't think that's going to happen. I think King's Landing will burn. I think that you're very right about the grayscale. I think that there are hints that there's going to be Jon Connington's come across with grayscale, that there could be outbreaks of it. How this is got rid of probably is going to be through fire. It's entirely possible wildfire. Yes, if you get Dragonfire coming from above, that might well set off some wildfire. Jon Connington, I'm almost certain, yes, will panic at some point when when he hears the bells. For those who don't know, his history was way back in Robert's Rebellion. He had his big moment. He was Hand of the King at the time, and he had tracked down Robert Baratheon during the rebellion. Robert Baratheon was hiding in this town called Stony Sept, and John Connington knew it. And he went door to door with his troops trying to hunt him down, and he didn't catch him. And then the bells started ringing, and the bells were the symbol, the signal that Ned and the army had arrived to come and relieve him. John Connington got routed out of there. His big moment to change the course of history, his big moment to prevent the rebellion from going forward, he had lost, and he was tortured by this, particularly by the fact that he knew that someone like Tywin would have just razed the town, wouldn't have bothered with it. He was just being too nice. And so this will be quite triggery if there are bells. And so, yes, I think that there is a link across to this here. I think that he, if he gets into a situation that is similar, he will get triggered and want to destroy huge amounts of things, not just be this kind of what he seems to look back on with sadness, the idea that he actually didn't take the ruthless approach. I think that he will potentially take the ruthless approach in the future. So yes, I think that this has been all mangled up on the show. I don't think Dany's going to be triggered by the bells or anything like that. That's not the way it's going to work. Question from Sir William Moss. This is quite a long question, but it's a question about Lord of the Rings as well as connections in with Song of Ice and Fire, which I love. So I'll read it out. It says, "It seems that Valyria and the Targaryen dynasty take a lot of inspiration from Numenor and the line of Elendil in Lord of the Rings. There's quite a few examples here. Elendil left their civilization prior to destruction, as did Aenar the Exile, the Targaryen who left Valyria before the Doom. There's other examples about the Mad King's desire to burn them all. Denethor, you may remember, who's the steward of Gondor, wanting to burn himself and his son. And so the question here is there a Targaryen parallel here? What extent do you think we might look to Lord of the Rings for clues as to the outcome for Dany, and indeed all the potential Targaryen claimants? Dany and Fagon both seem to be vying for the Aragorn position, while perhaps Jon is more of a Faramir, second in place to brothers. My take on this is that, first of all, George R. Martin, yes, he takes inspiration from Lord of the Rings. He says this again and again and again. He's not copying things across, but there are going to be times when we can see, oh yes, that's a clear link across. The character of Sam is the obvious one, because obviously Samwise Gamgee is the good character, the most good and pure character you probably in, certainly outside of the elves and all the rest of it, in The Lord of the Rings. And then Samwell is also this sort of really good character. Neither of them are particular fighters, but they're going to be very important in the plot. Now, you say that in terms of the Aragorn, Dany and Fagon both vying for the Aragorn position. Well, yes, but I think that George R. R. Martin is sort of writing it to make us think that Jon is the Aragorn character. And what I mean by that is that he is he's secretly is the heir, so secret that he doesn't even know it himself. He secretly is the heir to lots of prophecy and all the rest of it. However, Jon will turn out to be more of a Frodo character in my mind. In terms of Dany and Fagon being sort of the Aragorn position, there's a difference here, I think, in that I don't think that either of them are being set up to be leading the fight themselves against the others, or Sauron, or whoever it is. Dany is connected with the fire element, which is part of one of these two threats to humanity. So Dany is balancing this idea that she is the Azor Ahai reborn figure who's going to help save humanity, with the fact that she's also embodying one of the things which is threatening humanity, which is fire, the dragons. So she's not this kind of pure figure that Aragorn definitely is. And Fagon, no, I think, again, I would say that he's a new character, effectively. I don't think he's based on anyone in particular. This idea of somebody who is actually probably going to be as good a king as Westeros could imagine, but he's a plant. He's not really who he claims to be. So that is a wonderful twist. It's not a sort of a Tolkien thing, that one. Celia Tanner saying, Frodo, seriously? Yes, and the reason why is that when I say he's going to turn out to be the Frodo character, is that Frodo is the character who in Lord of the Rings, he carries the burden of having to save the world effectively, and at the end of it all, he is not whole again. He can never actually appreciate, because he's been through so much, he can't actually enjoy the fruits of what he's achieved, and he has to leave. At the end of it, he gets on the boat and sails off west. He can't, it's no longer the place for him. And that is very much the Jon vibe, is that he will be so damaged by what he has to do that at the end of this, he will, as we saw on the show, he went north. He had to leave the Seven Kingdoms because he could not enjoy the fruits of the success that he brought about it, because it damaged him so much. Lily Mellon saying, hope you're well. Roundabout question, what would you like to see happen with Dany in the coming books? I think that if you pitch together all of these kind of things here, I think what I want is for her to get all of those things that the three core drives, I want to see them coalesce into a situation where her character arc comes to an end. So she can't always just have this idea of home and the House of the Red Door and that not lead to anywhere. So I want her character arc to come to a point where she feels that she has home, or she knows what that home looks like. I want her drive to save people, to fight against slavery. I want that to actually achieve a thing, not just killing lots of slavers, but actually ending slavery. I want her to have achieved what she needs to achieve in Essos before she heads off to Westeros. And the Fire and Blood thing, I think that has to come to its final conclusion, that she will try and claim the Iron Throne. And I suspect that she won't actually, well, she may well end up getting it, but I don't think she's going to survive the story. So that's what I want, is I just want her character arcs to work through in the way that they hopefully should. Lady Pushkin says, do you think Daenerys will go any further east before going to Westeros? Do you think Quaithe is good or bad when it comes to Dany's interests? And do you think there's anything to be read into the fact that Drogon did not want to take her back to Meereen? So I don't think she's going to go any further east. As I say, we talked about it a moment ago, but I think it's possible she may see visions of further east. But I think that where Slavers Bay is now, as far east as she's going to go, she's going to head west from there. The Winds of Winter is all about getting all of the cast back to Westeros. And so that's what's going to be happening. In terms of Quaithe, whether her intentions are good or bad, her intention is to get Dany over to Westeros because I think because she thinks that she is Azor Ahai reborn. And I think that that's what she's trying to do. And the way she wants to do it is by getting Dany to re-embrace her Targaryen self, the spirit of Aegon the Conqueror, getting on a dragon, flying over to Westeros and claiming it. That is what is a very sensible approach to how you deal with the others. So is her intention good or bad? She thinks that she's doing the right thing in the same way that, say, Melisandre thinks that she's doing the right thing. Whether we would agree is a different matter. The interesting question is whether or not she's been influencing Drogon. I love that that idea. I mean, it's not one that I've assessed in any way, but if Quaithe is as powerful a magic user as we seem to think she is, then yeah, maybe she has been, if not controlling Drogon. Dany can't control Drogon in the way that we might think control. Dragons can't be controlled like that, except with things like magical horns and such like. But if Quaithe is, say, Shira Seastar, then she is of Targaryen blood, so she may well be able to do some kind of bonding with a dragon, and she may well be able to do some kind of magic which will prevent Drogon from going back. Because the bigger problem is not Drogon taking her away and ending up in the Dothraki Sea. The big problem is that Drogon just refused to fly back and just sort of moped around for a bit. That is the problem of control that's going on there. So might Quaithe have been involved in that? Well, it's possible. I haven't seen, as I say, I haven't seen any kind of like language hints that that's what's going on, but it certainly fits with what Quaithe is wanting. Thasio, thank you for super chat saying, do you think old Nan will come back? What happened to her? So she was, from my memory, I think she got dragged off to the Dreadfort with a whole load of captives from Winterfell. Now, if she's gone there, she's very old. So if she's gone there, I think there's probably a fair chance that she won't survive. She's, trudging through the snow at her age. But who knows? I don't know. I don't think she's got a big role to play in this story going forward. It's just a shame because she's obviously a great character, but her role was to act as the mouthpiece of oral tradition in the North. So she played her part. She's given us all of these stories. We're there, and we see that a lot of the oral traditions in the North are based, in fact, not all of them. There are some things that stories that Old Nan was telling that seem not to be true. She told a story about the Titan of Braavos comes to life whenever Braavos needs it, and things like that. That's not true. So, but she played her role, and so now she's sort of disappearing. She might make a reappearance, but she's not suddenly going to appear and say, "Aha! I now have the answer to everything in this story." We've moved on from that now. Connor Shields, thank you so much, saying, hi, Robert, just popping by, love all your work. Thank you, you're very welcome. Valerie says, I would like to know what your first reaction was of Dany burning King's Landing. Did you see this coming for the show, or was it a surprise to you? Did you like Dany's ending in the show? This is actually the first time anyone's actually asked whether I liked it. In terms of whether I saw it coming, I think I'd have to go back and have a look at my videos from then to see whether I sort of predicted it. I think I certainly saw her getting more fire and bloody, getting more willing to kill people and burn people. That the showrunners definitely did drop through that season. And her feeling more and more betrayed and alone, that again was very clearly built up throughout that last season. So I think my reaction at the time was surprised that she suddenly flipped and burned innocent civilians. That didn't make huge amounts of sense to me. But I was, as with most of season 8, honestly, I was just carried along. I just wanted to see how they were going to end this story. So that was my main feeling at the time. I think what I didn't... So did I like what they did with her character? No, I didn't. Because they simplified it. And this is what's happened all the way through. I think that a lot of what we see there was them squashing things together, because they should have had 2 or 3 seasons at the end to get all of that plot in, but they didn't, so they squashed it in together. What happens with King's Landing is actually we've got quite a few confrontations in King's Landing. As far as we can tell, we're going to have the Fagon's attack, taking it from the Lannisters, probably. Then we're going to have Daenerys coming and confronting him. Then she's probably going to head off and deal with the others. We're probably going to get Euron, I think, anyway. We're going to get Euron and Cersei coming back in, and then people are going to come back down and have to kind of root them out. So what was actually just like one thing on the show was probably 3 or 4 different events, big events, which all just got squashed and mashed into one. And so that's why it felt odd. And the idea that she just ended up being this kind of fire and blood vengeance killing machine doesn't fit with what I said at the very beginning of this, is that there are 3 aspects to her character. There are, as well as that, there is that element, and we can't pretend that that's not there, because she does like burning things and burning people. But she also has this desire for home, and she has this desire for justice. I think that she will do something that will cause the people to dislike her, and it will involve burning things, and it may well be that it's not exactly like that. There's some wildfire that catches fire that goes a lot worse than she thought. There's a whole load of other stuff going on there, but they simplified it down just to make it an easy decision for Jon to kill her, because she's just turned into this fascist dictator suddenly. That's not what's going to happen. I think, and I may well be coming up against some questions I got later, but I think what's going to happen is more of what I think they were trying to hint at with the show, which is this is the Weirwood Network. This is Bran, Bloodraven influencing things to get rid of not only the threat from ice, but the threat from fire. So that what we saw was Bran manipulating things right all the way through that season by telling people, getting Sam to tell Jon about who he was, and then sort of getting this information drip feeding out there, which started creating splits and all the rest of it. That's what they did in the show. In the books, I think it's going to be more subtle, but this is going to be the Weirwood Network trying to get rid of the twin threats of ice and threat of fire. And the threat of fire you get rid of by getting Daenerys killed. And so I think we're going to see a manipulative Weirwood Network through Bran, using something that Dany does as a way to manipulate Jon into killing her. That is where I see this going at a very high level. That's it. That Dany will do some terrible things, but not in the same kind of way. Anyway, that's my general thought on that one. Had a couple of questions. Vigstable, do you think it's possible that Jon Con gets healed by Sam in Old Town, through which he learns of Jon Snow's heritage, by which point Dany has already killed Fagon? It's possible, but I think Old Town's going to get burned quite quickly. I think that Euron is going to take Old Town. I think that Sam is going to have to escape from there and then head back up north. I think Jon Connington is not going to get healed of Greyscale. I think that he's going to try and hide it for as long as he possibly can in King's Landing. So Old Town is not going to be there. I don't think Sam's going to go off and heal Jon Connington in the way that he healed Jorah. But I like the idea that that John Connington learns about Jon Snow's heritage, but I think it works better if this is just by word of mouth and rumor and what people believe rather than absolutes. John Martin saying, hi, handsome. Thank you. Always look forward to and enjoy your live streams. Means a lot during these strange times. Thank you. I mean, I've been deliberately, partly because I have the time, but partly also because I know that people find some respite in these live streams and in the videos and just a little bit of escapism. So if that's a little part that I can play in helping everyone, then that's something I'm very happy to do. So thank you very much. I'm glad you appreciate it. Facio says, do you think that there might be a reverse magic to recreate the Arm of Dawn to transport the Dothraki? Better than convincing them to get on a ship. Wow, that's I've not heard of that before. That's a fantastic idea. So the Children of the Forest, the legends go, in order to stop the first men from coming across from Essos into Westeros, they did what was called the Hammer of the Waters, this big magic spell, destroyed the Arm of Dawn, which was basically this land bridge connecting Westeros and Essos. So the question is there some kind of reversey magic that can bring it back? I don't think that's going to happen. I love the idea of it. I don't think that's going to happen. As I say, what I think is more likely is that rather than getting the Dothraki to come down to Stavers Bay, then get on boats for months and months and months of journey, instead get them to travel off to the west, to as close as they possibly can get to Westeros, and then just ferry them across the much shorter journey there. So that's what seems to make sense. I don't think there's a huge water magic thing going on here that we will be able to use. Renoa Wildling, I probably completely mispronounced your name. Sorry, but thank you so much. Very generous super chat. I really appreciate it. Saying, just a sincere thanks for all the well-crafted, brilliantly delivered content over the years. Truly enjoy sitting in on Thursday nights. Loving the new Lord of the Rings videos. Can't wait for future insights. Wishing all good fortune. Stay safe and be well, everyone. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That's very kind. The Lord of the Rings videos, yeah, I've been doing a few videos on Sam and Gollum and some character studies. The next one I'm going to be doing actually is about the Scouring of the Shire, which is going to link together Lord of the Rings and Song of Ice and Fire, because the Scouring of the Shire is a much misunderstood chapter in the Lord of the Rings. So I'm going to talk about that for a little while, but also this is what George R. R. Martin has said is the biggest hint to how he wants to end A Song of Ice and Fire. We often talk about bittersweet. There's this interview though he did about 5 years ago where he says, I often talk about bittersweet. Let me explain what I mean by that. I mean like the Scouring of the Shire, the end of the Lord of the Rings. That's the feel I'm going for, he said. So if you understand the feel of the Scouring of the Shire, then you understand the feel of the end of A Song of Ice and Fire. So that video's that's coming out, I don't, possibly this weekend. So I'm going to see if I can get it out for then. If not, then at some point next week. But yeah, there will be more Lord of the Rings. Definitely at least one Lord of the Rings video every week from now on is my aim. Lady Leaf Underhill saying, I like the idea of the betrayal for gold, meaning golden company instead of money. What do you predict for that? Yeah, I think the betrayals are the hardest one of the House of the Undying prophecies to actually sort of pick up on and say categorically what they all are. I think the betrayal for gold, my best guess last time I looked at it was Jorah. He was given gold to betray her. You could argue that that wasn't his motivation. He definitely is one of the betrayals. I don't think that, I'm not 100% allied to that. I think that it's entirely possible it could be something else. But in terms of a betrayal for gold, I don't think it's the Golden Company, because then they've never been on her side. So they're not betraying her. They've always been on Fagon's side. So it doesn't work for me that, I mean, I like the idea, but it doesn't work for me. I think it seems to be that it's a betrayal because somebody has been paid to betray her. And that is why it seems to fit with Jorah. It's the ones that are for love that I think are all tied together, and I think they're all tied in with Jon, incidentally. Let's have a quick go back to some questions from my patrons. Lady Pushkin said, "Did Jorah get gold or a pardon?" Both was the idea. That was the promise anyway. Do you think? No, I've covered this one already. Where have I got up to? Milton Christopher Appling saying, "We know that Daenerys and Fagon don't meet in Essos. So what, when, where will their Westeros interaction be, and will it involve Jon? I suspect that his being named Aegon in the show is a nod to Aegon from the books and not what Rhaegar would have named Jon." Okay, well, in the first bit, I think that it makes sense that Dany makes her new camp Dragonstone. That does make sense. And then I think that Varys will try and broker something between the two of them. So I think that is how that's going to be. Jon may come down at that point, yes, because he will be coming to Dragonstone to try and get the Dragonglass. So that kind of all fits in around that kind of timescale. In terms of Jon being called Aegon as a nod to Aegon in the books, not what Rhaegar would have named him. Yeah, it's possible. I did do quite a bit of thinking about why Jon might be called Aegon at the time that we learned that in the show, and the conclusion I came to was that this is not actually what Rhaegar would have named him. We shouldn't be looking for what Rhaegar was going to name him. Rhaegar thought that he was going to get a daughter who, given that he's named his first son Aegon and then Rhaenys, he was wanting to name this daughter Visenya, because he is trying to recreate the three heads of the dragon, the original three Targaryens. So that seems to have been what's happened, was that when Rhaegar headed off, he said, "I'm going to have a daughter, and when she's born, name her Visenya." Then a boy is born. What to do? Now, what has happened in the meantime is Rhaegar's gone off, Rhaegar's died. Both of his children have died. And we've got Lyanna, who's the one who's going to name this child, having to decide what to call this child. She's got nothing to go on. So it does sort of make sense to me that in honor of Rhaegar's first son, who had died, she named this child Aegon. So it does make sense to me that might be the case. It's not that Rhaegar named two children the same thing. This is what Lyanna is doing in reaction to what has happened. So you could come up with justifications for other names, but I don't think it's a crazy name. Let's have a quick flick through. Rose W says, "Do you think Quaithe is Shira Seastar?" I covered this one already a bit earlier. Yeah, I think it's quite possible. Actually, this is my last question from my patrons. So now is the time. I've just seen the time. Actually, we've gone over the 2 hours, but now is the time to drop any more questions into the chat. I'll try and pick up a few more questions from the chat before signing off. So Henning J says, "Do you think that Daenerys will meet Quaithe again, be it in person or as a vision? And what relevance will her earlier prophecies and warnings have in the Winds of Winter. Well, I touched on this, but the in terms of whether they meet again, I think perhaps not in person, but perhaps Quaithe keeps on coming at her in sort of dreams and visions. What I'll read out, because I've got it up here now, I'll read out what Quaithe said. Quaithe said, "The glass candles are burning. Soon comes the pale mare, and after her the others, Kraken and Dark Flame, Lion and Griffin, the Sun's Son and the Mama's Dragon. Trust none of them. Remember the Undying. Beware the perfumed Seneschal." So this is what she said. And Dany is going to return back to Meereen at some point. She will discover soon comes the pale mare. That is the plague that's been going through Meereen. And she'll go, that's what I got told to watch out for. And after her come the others, the Kraken and the Dark Flame. This, she will also presumably meet Victarion, the Kraken. He's a Greyjoy. And Dark Flame, this is going to be Moqorro, who is a priest of Valor. So she'll go, okay, and Lion and a Griffin. Lion will be Tyrion, Griffin, presumably John Connington. Sun's Son, that was Quentyn Martell. The Mama's Dragon, that would be Fagon. Trust none of them. Beware the perfumed Seneschal. So basically, Quaithe has given Dany a list of people that she shouldn't trust. And how this is going to play into the story is that Dany will realize that she can trust, or think that she can trust, Quaithe, because she's predicted the Pale Mare and things like that, and Victarion. She's gets told not to trust Victarion, and so she's going to actually find out that that's real. And so she will then start to look out for these characters and instinctively not trust them. So she will, as I've already said, I suspect that she, although she may well allow Tyrion into her sort of team, I don't think she's going to completely trust him. Similarly, when she meets the perfumed Seneschal, which almost certainly is Varys, she will distrust him straight away. So what, in line with what we've been saying all the way through this, what George R. R. Martin cares about is not so much the truth or otherwise of a particular prophecy, it's how people react to it, whether they believe it. Dany seems to be wanting to believe these things that are put in front of her. And if she does, she is going to be distrusting people. And the more she distrusts people all the way through this, then the more alone she's going to be. It's just her, because she will need to trust people. Otherwise, it is just her and her dragons. That's what Quaithe wants. She just wants her and her dragons to be doing what they need to do. But this will lead Dany down quite a lonely and dark character path. So that's what the importance of Quaithe is. It will be taking her more towards being Targaryen-y, remembering who she is and all the rest of it. But it's also going to take her down quite a lonely path in all of this. Lord Mary 1, thank you for the super chat, saying, do you think Cersei will plant wildfire caches, and when Dany arrives to battle Fagon, explosions will be blamed on Dany? Love seeing you as always. And Quaithe is Alyssa Farman. Oh, well, okay, the last bit, Quaithe is Alyssa Farman. Possibly. So for those who don't know, Alyssa Farman is a character which we read about in Fire and Blood Part 1. She was strongly linked in with the Targaryens, very close friends with one of the princesses, probably lovers actually, and she steals some dragon eggs. These dragon eggs, the link is here already, because these 3 dragon eggs, she sells them in Braavos. These are almost certainly the 3 dragon eggs that end up with Dany that hatch to become her dragon. So there is a link there. But Alyssa Farman buys a massive boat. She sails it all around the world, it would appear. There are rumors that it appears all the way over in Ashai. So yes, that meets up with, again, with the possibility that it was might be Quaithe, because Quaithe is a shadow binder, so from Shadowlands by Ashai. The problem is that Alyssa Farman, we don't hear that she's a particular magic user, and added to which why she would have this desire to get Daenerys to do what she did. It's possible. Again, it ties in. I like it. It's possible, as I say, it ties in with this idea that Quaithe is just a person who was in Ashai, has read some ancient things, come to the conclusion that Dany is the savior of humanity and is now trying to guide her. Alyssa Farman is a fantastic character, and I would not be even slightly disappointed if it turns out that Quaithe is Alyssa Farman. But just purely for the reasons of sort of literary balance with Bloodraven, that's why if it is a person that we've heard of before, Shira Seastar is the one that works for me. But in the first part of this, asking whether Cersei will plant wildfire caches, and when Dany arrives to battle Phagon, explosions will be blamed on Dany. Yeah, it's entirely possible that there are already wildfire caches around there from the time of Aerys, and so they could, if fire is used, dragonfire is used, then there will be bigger explosions, and yes, that would be blamed on Dany. There is, I've been told, there's another super chat somewhere from someone that I've missed. I'm going to try and find it. Apologies if I can't see it. Okay, so apologies for whoever did a super chat that I've missed. What I will try and do is answer that one next time. This is saying Rob Reyes hasn't had his super chat answered yet. He posted his question in the chat. Let me have a very quick look for this. If I can't see it, then I will try and answer it next time. Okay, I'm afraid I can't, so apologies for that. Oh, here we go. So, Rob, our focus on Miri Mazda's prophecy is mainly about Dany and kids, but Dany asked about Drogo being himself again. How do you think the prophecy will play in the future? Okay, so this is Miri Mazda basically, when Dany says, when will he be himself again? Miri Mazda basically gives this whole series of examples that are never. Now, there are, when the sun rises in the west and things like that. The answer to all of these things is it's not going to happen. So there are some people I know who've tried to draw some kind of analogies from this to say that this is Miri Mazda doing a prophecy. I don't think that this is a prophecy. I think that this is just her saying this isn't going to happen in a quite poetic but nasty way. That's what I think that was going on there. I don't think that this was a prophecy. Yes, we've got Dany and the kid, but Dany asking about Drogo being himself again. How do you think the prophecy will play out in the future? The short answer is I don't think it is a prophecy, so I don't think it is going to play out. Okay, I think we've got a few people asking about House Dane's words. George R.R. Martin has deliberately not told us House Dane's words because they are going to be spoilery in some way. They're going to be some connection with the role of their sword, I suspect, which is incredibly magical, and it could be something as vague as "We bring the dawn" or something like that. I've speculated on this a lot of times, and I think that the short answer is that It's probably just something that simple, but there's an outside chance that their house words are something which are actually giving away a plot detail of what's going to happen. It would not surprise me if their sword turns out to be what we call Lightbringer, this kind of Azor Ahai sword. It is different to every other sword. It is the only sword that we know of that was probably around during the first long night. It looks different, it acts different, and so if any sword that we know at the moment is Lightbringer, then that is what it is. So it's possible that it's linked in with that. Okay, guys, I think I've been going on now for well over 2 hours. So just in order to spare my voice, I think I'm going to start winding it up there. But if you are watching this back later, then you have a look somewhere around here is going to be a link to my Patreon page. That's if you want to either support the channel or get access to some of the things I was talking about earlier. And somewhere up around here is a link to some of the other, or playlist of the other live streams that I've been doing recently. Okay, everyone, take care. I will be back next week with another one of these character studies through the Winds of Winter. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you again soon.